You've been lied to about every great steppe empire you've ever heard of. The history they taught you, the massive Turkic migrations thundering out of the Altai, sweeping away everything in their path. It's a clean, convenient fairy tale. But hidden in the heart of Russia, on the banks of the Volga River, a tiny group of people possess a biological secret that shatters that fairy tale. Their language should have died 1,000 years ago, tying them directly to the heart of Asia, yet the DNA coursing through their veins belongs to a completely different world. A civilization that mainstream archaeology says never existed in this place, at this time. In the next few minutes, you're going to see genetic evidence so impossible it forced scientists to rewrite the history of Eurasia. This isn't speculation. This is the Chuvash anomaly. And what was found in their cells will force you to question everything you think you know about identity, conquest, and survival. Here is the forbidden truth, front-loaded, because you deserve to know exactly what we are dealing with. In 2002, a landmark study in the American Journal of Human Genetics looked at the Y chromosomes of men across Eurasia. The Y chromosome is passed from father to son, virtually unchanged for generations. It is a living fossil of paternal lineage. When researchers looked at the Chuvash people, a Turkic-speaking group in the Volga region of Russia, they expected to see the genetic hallmarks of the great Turkic migrations from the Altai-Sayan region of Siberia. Instead, they found something else. They found that nearly 28% of Chuvash men, more than 1 in 4, carry a specific mutation called NTAT or N3A. This marker is not the signature of the southern steppe warriors. It is a northern, uralic signature. It is the same lineage found in Finns, in the Saami people of the Arctic, and in the ethnogenesis of the Siberian tundra. A quarter of the Chuvash male population carries the blood of the deep north, all while speaking a language of the deep east. It's a genetic paradox, a biological oxymoron, and it suggests that the history of the Volga region is not what the textbooks told us. It suggests a hidden civilization, one whose language survived in the mouth of a people who were never supposed to be here at all. But to understand this anomaly, to understand why this is a story about a civilization that shouldn't exist, we have to go to the place. Close your eyes and picture the map. We are not in the frozen tundra. We are not in the Altai Mountains. We are in the Chuvash Republic, a small, landlocked region nestled in the bend of the Great Volga River, about 400 miles east of Moscow. It is a landscape of rolling hills, dense forests, and fertile black earth. For centuries, the mainstream narrative, the one taught in schools, the one printed in encyclopedias, has been simple and clean. The story goes like this. The Chuvash are Turks. They speak a Turkic language. Therefore, their ancestors must have migrated from the Turkic homeland in Central Asia, riding with the Huns, or the Bulgars, subjugating the local Slavic and Finnic tribes, and establishing a state. The Volga-Bulgar state. That was the civilization. It converted to Islam, traded furs along the Silk Road, and was eventually destroyed by the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. After the Mongols came the Golden Horde, and eventually, the Russians. The Chuvash, according to this version of history, are simply the last, faded remnant of those ancient Turkic conquerors. A lost tribe of Bulgars. End of story. But there was a problem. A problem that mainstream history quietly swept under the rug for decades. It was the language. Because while the Chuvash are classified as a Turkic people, their language is not like the others. It is not like Turkish, or Kazakh, or Uzbek, or Tatar. It is an outlier, a fossil. It belongs to the Oghur, or Bulgar, branch of the Turkic family tree, while nearly every other living Turkic language belongs to the common Turkic branch. To a linguist, the difference is immense. Listening to Chuvash is like listening to a different family entirely. It's the difference between modern English and ancient Frisian. The separation between Oghur and common Turkic didn't happen in the Middle Ages. It happened deep in antiquity, perhaps 2,000 years ago or more, likely somewhere near the Altai-Sayan Mountains or the Mongolian Plateau. Yet here it is, alive and well, in a pocket of Russia, surrounded by a sea of Slavic and Kipchak Turkic speakers. It is a linguistic ghost, a haunting echo of a language that should have been erased centuries ago, preserved perfectly in a population that, according to their genes, never migrated here in large numbers at all. This is the disconnect that launched 1,000 genetic investigations. If the Chuvash language came from the east, but their blood doesn't match that story, then what really happened on the banks of the Volga? This brings us to the heart of the investigation, the hard science. Let's open the genetic file, look at the data, and trace the migration arrows on the map. Because we are not just looking at one gene here. We are looking at a mosaic of evidence, a genetic portrait painted with two different brushes. First, the male line, the Y chromosome. We already mentioned the shock, 28% NTAT. To understand how strange this is, we need to compare it. If you look at the Y chromosomes of most Turkic-speaking populations from Central Asia, the Uzbeks, the Kazakhs, the Kyrgyz, you see high frequencies of lineages like R1A, C2, or O. These are the ghosts of the Indo-European steppe riders and the ancient Siberians. They reflect the deep, complex history of Central Asia. But in the Chuvash, that 28% NTAT is a screaming signal. It points north, to the forest zone. This marker is believed to have originated somewhere in northern China or Mongolia, but it expanded and thrived in the boreal forests of Siberia and the Urals. Among the Finns, it reaches up to 60%. Among the Saami, it is even higher. Among the Nganassans of the Taimyr Peninsula, it is nearly universal. This is the lineage of hunter-gatherers and reindeer herders, not steppe horsemen. But the Chuvash genome isn't just NTAT. Alongside it, we find another major player, haplogroup R1A. This marker is often present at frequencies around 30% in Chuvash men. R1A is the famous steppe marker, associated with the Bronze Age expansion of Indo-European speakers from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. This makes sense. The Volga region is right at the edge of the steppe. For millennia, nomadic herders from the Yamnaya culture and later the Scythians and Sarmatians moved through this territory. Their genetic influence is a baseline layer in the population. So the paternal picture of the Chuvash is a mix, a northern, uralic-affiliated component, NTAT, and a western steppe component, R1A. But notice what is relatively absent. The specific lineages most strongly associated with the medieval Turkic elite from the Altai. The Chuvash carry some Central Asian markers, but not at the overwhelming dominant frequencies you would expect if they were the direct biological descendants of a massive conquering horde. The genetic echo of the Great Migration is a whisper, not a shout. Now let's turn to the maternal line. The mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, passed from mother to child. A 2004 study in the European Journal of Human Genetics, led by B. Malyarchuk, looked precisely at this. And the results are stunning. Chuvash mtDNA is overwhelmingly West Eurasian. We are talking about standard European haplogroups. H, the most common in Europe. U5, an ancient hunter-gatherer lineage. T, J, and K. These are the maternal lines of the farmers and foragers of prehistoric Europe. They are not the maternal lines of Siberia or Central Asia. But there is a twist. Mixed in with these European lineages, the geneticists found a minority of East Eurasian haplogroups. C, D, and Z. These are the classic maternal lineages of the Altai-Sayan region, of Mongolia, and of southern Siberia. They are present, but they are a minority component. So step back and look at the whole board. The male line, a massive northern marker, NTAT, plus European steppe markers, R1A. The female line, mostly European markers, H, U5, with a dash of Altai-Sayan markers, C, DZ. The language, an archaic Turkic tongue from the Altai. How do you reconcile this? This is where the investigation takes a turn, because the DNA isn't lying. The DNA is showing us a process of admixture, but it's an admixture that happened on top of a pre-existing population. The genetic data suggests that the Chuvash are predominantly descended from a pre-Turkic local population. These were the people of the Volga forests, likely tribes speaking uralic languages or long-extinct Paleo-European tongues. They were the genetic kin of the Finns, the Mordvins, the Mari. They lived in the forest zone, hunting, fishing, and later farming. Their genetic signature was this NTAT lineage and these West Eurasian maternal lines. And then, history arrived. The timeline takes us back to the late 7th century CE. This is the era of the Khazars and the Bulgars. The Turkic Khaganate, the first great empire of the steppe, had fractured. Tribes of ogre-speaking Bulgars, originating from the Pontic steppe zone north of the Black Sea, began to migrate. One group, led by Khan Asparuh, moved southwest and crossed the Danube. Those became the Bulgarians, who would eventually be Slavicized. But another group moved northeast, up the Volga River. These were the Volga Bulgars. Around the late 7th or 8th century, they established a state in the region where the Volga meets the Kama. They were a minority elite, a warrior aristocracy, a merchant class, bringing with them a sophisticated Khazar-influenced culture, a written language, and eventually, in the 10th century, they converted to Islam. They built cities like Bulgar and Bilyar, which became major hubs of the medieval fur trade. The mainstream assumption was that these Volga Bulgars moved in, outnumbered the locals, and essentially became the modern Chuvash and Kazan Tatars. But the DNA tells a very different story. The DNA suggests that the Volga Bulgars were an elite dominance. They did not replace the population. They ruled them. They taxed them. They integrated with them. The local, pre-Turkic population of the Volga forest, the ones carrying NTAT and European mtDNA, underwent a language shift. They adopted the language of their rulers. They absorbed the political identity of the Bulgar state. Over the centuries, the distinction between the ruling elite and the commoners blurred. The Bulgars, being a small minority, were genetically swamped by the locals. But their legacy, their most powerful inheritance, was not their Y chromosome, it was their words. Think about the implications of that. It means the Chuvash language is not the DNA of a population replacement. It is the cultural DNA of a state. It is the linguistic artifact of the Volga Bulgar civilization, a civilization that thrived for 500 years, only to be shattered by the Mongol invasion of 1223 to 1236. The Mongols, led by Batu Khan, destroyed Bulgar. They burned the cities. They killed the nobility. The state collapsed. But the people, the peasants, the forest dwellers, the mixed descendants of the elite and the locals, they remained, and they kept speaking their version of the Bulgar tongue. As the centuries passed, the region was absorbed into the Golden Horde. Other Turkic tribes, Kipchak speakers, moved in. Tatar became the dominant language of the steppe. But in the forests, in the small villages along the Volga, the Chuvash held on to their archaic language. They held on to the tongue of a dead empire, long after the empire itself was forgotten. Let's do a deep dive into the specific admixture event. We need to understand the time frame. The formation of the Volga Bulgar state is the key moment. If the NTAT lineage reaches 28% in the Chuvash, is that because it was already high in the local population before the Bulgars arrived, or did it increase afterward? The genetic evidence, particularly the presence of NTAT in neighboring uralic groups like the Mari and Udmurts, suggests it was already present. The NTAT lineage is not unique to the Chuvash in this region. It forms a background radiation across the entire Volga-Ural forest zone. It is the signature of the pre-Turkic substrate. But here is a finer detail. The NTAT lineage in the Chuvash is not identical in its downstream subbranches to the NTAT in Finland. They share a root, but they diverged. This means they had a common ancestor population somewhere in the Urals or western Siberia thousands of years ago, but they have been evolving separately. The specific subclades found in the Chuvash show evidence of a founder effect. A founder effect happens when a small population experiences a dramatic reduction in numbers, or when a small group breaks away from a larger population, and the genetic diversity of the survivors becomes overrepresented in the descendants. The fact that one lineage, NTAT, is so common suggests that amidst the chaos of the medieval period, through wars, famines, and plagues, the population bottlenecked, and this particular lineage was lucky. It thrived, it expanded, it became the paternal line of a huge segment of the modern Chuvash nation. Compare this to the maternal line. The mtDNA is diverse. It contains H, U5, T, J, K, and also C, D, Z. This diversity on the female side indicates a much more stable demographic history. Often in human history, when we see a diverse mtDNA pool but a clumped Y chromosome pool, it tells us a story of migration. It tells us that men often moved, settled, and married local women, while the female population remained relatively stable or absorbed newcomers more gradually. This is the classic signature of an elite migration. The men of the steppe, the Bulgars, did arrive. They did intermarry. They contributed some of their genes, those East Eurasian mtDNA lineages C, D, and Z, and some Y chromosome lineages from Central Asia, but they did not replace the biological foundation of the community. The women of the Volga forest passed their DNA down through the centuries, and that DNA is still there, speaking loudly in the genetic profile of the modern Chuvash. So we have this strange, beautiful paradox. a people who speak a Turkic language from the Altai, a people whose genetics are a hybrid of Arctic uralic forest dwellers and European steppe pastoralists, a people who are, in a biological sense, mostly not Turkic. This is the civilization that shouldn't exist narrative. The Chuvash are not a living remnant of a horde of invaders. They are the living testament to a political and cultural process. They are the genetic proof that a language can conquer without an army of genes. They are the descendants of the subjects of the Volga-Bulgar state, a state that controlled the trade routes of the Silk Road, a state that minted its own coins, a state that was a major player in the medieval world, but which has been largely forgotten by Western history books. The DNA of the Chuvash is not just their own. It is the archived memory of a lost civilization. It is the genetic record of the Volga-Bulgars, preserved not in the Y chromosomes of their supposed descendants, but in the very existence, the linguistic identity, of a people who absorbed them. But wait, if the Chuvash language is the sole surviving member of the Ogre branch, why did they survive while the Volga-Bulgar state collapsed? Why didn't the Chuvash language die out, absorbed into Tatar or Russian? This is where the geography matters. The Chuvash lived in the forests. After the Mongol destruction, the steppe was dominated by Kipchak-speaking nomads who eventually formed the Tatar Khanates. The steppe was their domain. But the forests were a refuge. The Chuvash retreated deeper into the woods, north and west of the Volga. They were a fragmented, decentralized people. They had no powerful Khan. They were subjects, paying tribute to the Golden Horde, then to the Kazan Khanate, then to the Russian Tsardom. Their survival strategy was not military dominance. It was cultural insularity. They practiced a syncretic indigenous religion, a blend of animism and ancestral worship, which kept them distinct from their Muslim Tatar neighbors and their Orthodox Russian neighbors. This religious and geographic isolation acted as a barrier. It slowed down the language shift. It allowed the Chuvash to maintain their unique identity for centuries, even as the world around them changed. Their language became the fortress wall, a fortress built not of stone, but of words. A fortress designed to protect the memory of a state that no longer existed. Let's look at the timeline again. The migration event that brought the Ogre language to the Volga is tied to the late 7th century. The elevated Ntat lineage may trace its origins or its successful expansion to that period or earlier. But think about what this means for the people who lived there. Before the 7th century, they are often invisible to us. They wrote no records. They built no stone monuments that lasted. But their genes are screaming at us. They were there. They were numerous. They were the biological bedrock of the Chuvash people. The Chuvash are, in a sense, the descendants of the invisible ones, who adopted the name, the language, and the civilization of their rulers. It is a profound lesson in how identity is constructed. Are you your language? Are you your blood? Are you your history? The Chuvash answer is yes. All of it. They are a Turkic people because they speak a Turkic language. They are a Volga people because their ancestors have lived there for millennia. They are a European people because their mothers were European. They are a uralic people because their fathers carried Ntat. They are living proof that identity is a palimpsest, a manuscript written over and over again, where the old text bleeds through the new. But we have to ask the uncomfortable question. Is the term Volga-Bulgar DNA even accurate? The source notes flag this as approximate. We know the Volga-Bulgars existed. We know they were of Turkic origin, but we do not have a pristine, unadmixed DNA sample from a 9th century Volga-Bulgar prince to compare against. The small percentage of East Asian mtDNA, CDZ, and the minor Y chromosome lineages from the Altai-Sayan region are the likely ghosts of the actual Bulgar elite. It is a faint signal, but it is there. It is the smoking gun of a small-scale migration. The mistake is to assume that a language shift requires a massive demographic shift. It doesn't. The history of the world is full of cases where small, prestigious elites impose their language on a larger population. Think of the spread of Latin in the Roman Empire. Think of the spread of Arabic in the Middle East and North Africa. In many cases, the actual genetic contribution of the conquerors was a drop in the bucket. The Volga-Bulgars were no different. They provided the political framework, the narrative, the identity. The local population provided the people. And through that synthesis, a new people was born, the Chuvash. So here we are, at the reflection. This story matters not just for genealogists or history buffs. It matters for how we understand ourselves. In a world obsessed with purity, with the idea that our blood dictates our identity, the Chuvash stand as a quiet, powerful rebuttal. They are a people who are genetically one thing, linguistically another, culturally a third, and historically a fourth. And they are not confused. They know exactly who they are. They are Chuvash. The existence of the Chuvash proves that civilization is not just genes. It is an idea. It is a system of communication. It is a memory. Think about what it means to carry this marker. If you, watching this, carry the NTAT haplogroup on your Y chromosome, you are connected to this story. You are connected to the ancient forest dwellers of the Volga. You are connected to the Finns and the Saami, and the reindeer herders of the tundra. Your ancestor, thousands of years ago, walked the same boreal forests, fished the same rivers, saw the same stars. And if you are Chuvash, you carry this story in your very cells. Your ancestors saw the rise of the Volga Bulgars. They saw the minarets of Bulgar gleam in the sun. They heard the ogre language spoken in the markets. They felt the terror of the Mongol hooves. They survived. They adapted. They adopted a new name, a new language, a new religion, and then they held on to it for a millennia. Your existence is an act of preservation. You are the final chapter of a book that was thought to be lost. But why is this narrative, the civilization that shouldn't exist, so compelling? Because it challenges our deepest assumptions about the past. We are conditioned to think of history as a series of replacements. Neanderthals replaced by Cro-Magnons, Romans replaced by barbarians, Native Americans replaced by Europeans. We think of migrations as waves that wash away the old. The Chuvash story is different. It is a story of assimilation. It is a story of a substrate persisting, absorbing, transforming. The old DNA did not vanish. It learned a new language. It built a new civilization on the foundations of the old. The Chuvash are not the remnants of the Bulgars. They are the children of the people who became the Bulgars. And that is a much richer, more complex story. Consider the names. The name Chuvash itself is a puzzle. Some etymologists link it to the Suvar, or Siberian tribes of the steppe, a group associated with the old Onugur Confederation. If so, the name itself is a fossil of a tribal identity from the 6th century. Other theories link it to a Turkic word for calm or peaceful, or to a Finno-Ugric word for the people. The name itself is a battlefield of competing histories. It is a map of their complex identity. We need to talk about the numbers. We mentioned 28% NTAT. In the original 2002 study by Zergel and colleagues, the sample included a significant number of Chuvash men. The finding was clear. But it is important to note that genetic frequencies can vary by region. The Chuvash Republic has districts that were historically more isolated, more forested. In those regions, the NTAT frequency might be even higher, reflecting an even stronger connection to the pre-Turkic layer. In areas closer to the Tatar border, there might be more admixture with Kipchak-derived lineages. Genetic studies are snapshots, not static portraits. They capture a moment in a dynamic history, but the pattern is unmistakable. The core of the Chuvash genetic identity is not a Central Asian steppe identity. It is a Volga-Ural forest identity, with a thin, but culturally potent, veneer of Turkic elite dominance. And consider the maternal lines again. Malyarchuk's 2004 study in the European Journal of Human Genetics looked at the haplogroups. The presence of U5 is particularly interesting. U5 is one of the oldest haplogroups in Europe. It is associated with the first modern humans who moved into the continent after the Ice Age. It is found in high frequencies among the Saami of Scandinavia, a group that also shares the NTAT Y chromosome. The presence of U5 in the Chuvash mtDNA pool, alongside NTAT in the paternal line, strongly suggests a shared, ancient population that stretched across the forest zone of northern Europe and western Siberia. This is the pre-Indo-European, pre-Turkic world. The Chuvash are a window into that world. So when we say the DNA of a civilization that shouldn't exist, we are talking about two levels. On the one hand, we have the Volga-Bulgar civilization, a Muslim, Turkic, mercantile state in the forests of Russia, destroyed by the Mongols, whose linguistic legacy survives in the Chuvash language. On the other hand, we have an even older, anonymous civilization of forest dwellers, the pre-Turkic inhabitants of the Volga-Ural region, whose genetic legacy survives in the blood of the Chuvash. Neither of these civilizations has a monumental legacy like Rome or Egypt. They are almost invisible. But their DNA persists. It persists in a people who still live on the same land, speak a language that carries the echo of their swords, and carry the blood of their ancestors. To understand this is to understand the true nature of history. It is not a clean line. It is a tangled web. It is not a story of victors. It is a story of survivors. The Chuvash are survivors. They survived the fall of the Khazar Khaganate. They survived the rise and fall of the Volga Bulgar state. They survived the Mongol apocalypse. They survived the Black Death. They survived the expansion of the Russian Empire. They survived the forced Christianization under Ivan the Terrible and subsequent czars. They survived the Soviet Union, which tried to homogenize them, to erase their distinctiveness. And they are still here, speaking their strange, archaic language, carrying their strange, archaic genes. They are a living museum of a lost world. But why should you care? Because in a globalized world, where cultures are homogenizing at an alarming rate, the Chuvash are a reminder that identity is not a simple equation. It is a choice. It is a story we tell ourselves, backed by the undeniable facts of our biology. The Chuvash language is one of the most unique linguistic treasures on Earth. It is a direct link to the language of Attila's contemporaries. It is a direct link to the Bulgars of Kubrat and Asparuh. It is a direct link to the merchants of Bulgar who handled silver from the Abbasid Caliphate. When a Chuvash person speaks, they are speaking the language of a dead empire, a language that has evolved in near total isolation from its linguistic relatives for over 1,000 years. That is a rare, precious thing. It is a biological and cultural inheritance that cannot be replicated. Once it is gone forever. The genetic story of the Chuvash is a testament to the power of culture over biology. It shows that a small, organized minority can, through political, economic, and religious influence, persuade a large population to adopt their language and their identity, even while the genetic signatures of that large population remain dominant. The Chuvash are a living experiment in ethnogenesis. They are the proof that demography is not destiny. So the next time you think about the great migrations of history, think about the Chuvash. Think about the invisible majorities who did the work, raised the families, and grew the crops, while the famous names of history fought their battles. Think about the ones whose names are lost, but whose genes are not. The Chuvash are the voice of the voiceless. Their DNA is a message from a civilization that shouldn't exist, telling us that it did exist, that it was here, and that it is still here, inside them. What they found next changed everything. It wasn't just a matter of confirming the NTAT anomaly. It was the realization that the entire map of Eurasian prehistory needed to be redrawn. The Chuvash are not a footnote. They are a key. They are a key that unlocks the door to the pre-Turkic, pre-Slavic, pre-Indo-European world of northern Eurasia. Their genes are a time machine. We will leave you with this thought. The Volga-Bulgar civilization is often called a lost civilization. But it isn't lost. It is living. It is living in the mouths of the Chuvash people. Every time a Chuvash grandmother teaches a Chuvash lullaby to her grandchild, she is passing on the DNA of a dead empire. Every time a Chuvash farmer speaks to his neighbor, he is using the vocabulary of a medieval merchant from Bulgar. The civilization is not gone. It is sleeping inside a language. And the blood of the forest people, the invisible foundation of it all, continues to flow. It is flowing through a nation that has successfully navigated thousands of years of change, absorbing, adapting, and enduring. That is the legacy. Not a pile of stones, but a living, breathing community. A civilization that shouldn't exist, and yet, defiantly, beautifully, does. Now, if the Chuvash anomaly rewired your understanding of human history, smash that like button and subscribe. Because this is just the beginning of the buried genetic stories we're uncovering. Drop a comment on what lost civilization we should decode next, and turn on notifications so you never miss a revelation. The code of your own ancestry might hold more impossible secrets than you think. See you in the next one. Thanks for staying until the very end. Goodbye for now.